Hey everybody, this is Susan Rosen, and I have Dr. Cris Azzola here with me again today. As I think I let everybody know that we're going to try and do this on a little more regular basis. And we have what I think is a very interesting and um, topic to talk about. I was trying to think of another descriptive word, but I think we'll just go on from there. Um, and that is to talk about menopause, and particularly, um, obviously, women. And just to let everybody know, we are going to also, not leaving the men out, have another podcast where Cris and I are going to talk about men's menopause, which is called Andropause. Did I get
Yes.
that right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I thought would be very interesting because I'm not sure that many people realize that men go through their own version of menopause,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
not necessarily any better and not necessarily any worse, but their own version. Okay, so back to today's topic. We want to talk about menopause and um, the the part of it that we're all very familiar with, and then also Cris is going to talk about some of the carry-on things that either come out of that or continue even after the official menopause period is over. So, welcome,
Yes.
Cris. Glad to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to be here. I really enjoy our conversations immensely. And this is a huge topic for sure, and I'm sure overwhelming for uh, any person going through it, either beginning perimenopausally or in the middle of it. It's often something that people don't think about until it's happening to them, and then there's which we're very lucky these days to have so much information come out about it, but it is an overwhelming topic when you start doing your own research. There's lots to be had and tried to sift through. Um, so
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's good to talk
And
about.
yeah, and I'm sure you can probably also talk about one of those things. Not one of those things. Talk about those things that a lot of women may not even realize is from the menopause.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We all know
Yeah.
the traditional, oh yeah, this, oh yeah, you get moodier, oh yeah, it's kind of like having your period all the time kind of thing. But there are some things I know even when I went through it that there were things that I didn't even realize had to do with the menopause.
Yes, and in my own research, I was surprised to find again and again how unique of an experience. There are those baseline symptoms that we all kind of heard about over and over, the mood changes that you mentioned, fatigue, night sweats, hot flashes, can be anxiety, depression, just mood problems in general.
Mm.
But it's really striking is how unique each woman's experience is. And on top of that, it comes at a certain age. The typical age for menopause is 51, but women is in their 40s can start experiencing, either perimenopause or some people go into early menopause.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a unique experience, as well as that is a time when a lot of other conditions start to arise, that may or may not be related. So that is what makes it a trickier kind of presentation, so to speak, or
Uh-huh.
symptoms within yourself to judge, because all things are converging together at one time.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So a lot of it is, obviously, some people call it, I really love this idea that menopause is just a phase and a stage of life rather than a condition or a disease to be
Yeah.
controlled or managed. um,
That's good. That's good. I mean, that is one of those things that because I think just very quickly, I think a lot of people, um, a lot of societies, a lot of men and women use it as an excuse,
yes.
Oh, it's just because I'm menopausal.
Right.
Which for a lot of women is a very convenient excuse. And then everybody goes, oh, okay, she's really okay. It's just a phase.
Right. Yeah, and that's on the one hand, it's great to be compassionate with ourselves and realize you're going through a process, and definitely the frustration and stress actually has been shown in research to make it worse, make the symptoms worse if you are already burnt out and stressed and starting that process. So we want to have self-compassion, but we also don't want to kind of dismiss things that are happening and not tuning into our bodies, because one of the things, for example, that is, night sweats are a typical symptom, but they can be symptoms of other conditions. People with ovarian cancer or other types of cancer also have night sweats. So we definitely, it's a rare condition, but it's not something where we want to start to dismiss everything as like, oh, it's just menopause, because you might need to dig further. And one of the surprising things, for example, is if you're anemic or if you have a thyroid condition, that can lead to sweats. And so you want to have that checked out and looked into to make sure that you're not assuming something as a menopausal symptom rather than a condition that can be treated and addressed in another way.
Wow. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Um, so is there a difference with how some women might go through menopause if they do start a little earlier, or if it actually waits until later? I mean, I started a little bit later, but that was because I was going to an acupuncturist and he was giving me treatment and and um, and some kind of pills that he had, um, you know, that actually kept me having periods and all that kind of stuff. So it actually put off the menopause. And at a certain point, I said, okay, I can't take this anymore. I want to get rid of it. So I gotta start it. I gotta stop it. I gotta start it.
Got
Not
it.
deal with periods anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't say in the research that there is specific correlation to when. Definitely there is a correlation with your hereditary, like how your mom went through menopause, the definitely genetics, cultural factors play in, our own attitudes about it. It's interesting that certain cultures, the women only experience some very minor condition, symptoms, excuse me, and then in others, it's especially in our Western and American culture, much more severe, and in our own cultural treatment of it, it's makes it more complicated, and the perception is much more, oh no, I'm losing my mind, or I'm forgetting it, and it will be like that always. But definitely, people who have tried to undergo, for example, hormone therapy for symptom management, the younger you are, around your 50s, let's say, those kinds of therapies have a greater benefit if you're younger than if you go through the process and start hormone therapy much later. Then those hormones are not as helpful in managing symptoms. So there is definitely a timing issue. And you bring up a really great point in that a lot of the studies that have been done they're all different. Some women were on hormones early in their process. Others, they started much later. So it's not an apples for apples comparison when you look at the research, and that's what makes it somewhat confusing, and why an individualized approach really helps to look at that person's history and other conditions, what's going on, and working to even then try what therapies work. And if you are going to do hormones versus a more bioidentical hormone approach, or just a natural non-hormone approach, then each individual person and their body is going to respond uniquely. So you want to make sure to work with someone one-on-one to figure out what works best for you, because research is not that clear for everyone across the board.
Right. No, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, none of us had, even before we hit menopause, none of us had the same kind of cycles, or heavy or not heavy, or periods and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just, it really is
Yeah.
so unique. And yet, um, I don't know, the medical community, um, the society, particularly Western society, um, doesn't like to deal with oddities, with uniqueness. They're
Mm-hmm.
much as they give it lip service. They'd much rather be able to give generalizations. Well, when you start menopause, you're going to feel like this,
Right.
right?
Yes.
There's no variety.
Right. Yeah, and I think that does lead to some feelings of isolation that, oh,
Mm.
the one interesting symptom is some women end up having cold sweats rather than hot flashes. And so it can lead to, oh, I'm the only person experiencing this because I've never heard my friends talk about it, or,
Okay.
so that's one thing these days is we do have more access to information to be able to
Mm.
search some of these things and see that we're not alone in experiencing unique symptoms.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, and it's not taboo to talk about anymore
Yes.
either. It totally is out in the open.
Mm-hmm.
Women are much more out there about a lot of things, and I think that's one of them.
Enormously helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always was. I was complaining from the beginning to anybody who wanted to hear about it.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting to note that even within, again, this is just generalizing, but about 75 to 90% of women experience symptoms that resolve within about 4 years, even without treatment. But in about 10 to 25% of women, the symptoms persist. And that's where, we also get this idea that, sometimes it's easy to focus just on the folks who are having a really hard time, but not everyone is having a hard time. So it's striking that balance between, trying to see where you are on that spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. And there may only be like one thing that you're having a big
Mm-hmm.
problem with.
Yes.
Right. And then it's like they almost make you feel, I can't think of what the right word is, but that you shouldn't be complaining because you only have the one thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And it's like, no, I only have the one thing, but it's a big thing.
Right. One of the things that is still being worked out is a lot of arthritis, unfortunately, starts around the same time, but there are joint pains associated with menopausal symptoms, as well as, of course, this manifestation of osteoarthritis. But there are a lot of inflammation that happens, and maybe carpal tunnel in the hand. And so, yes, maybe that's just manifesting in that. But I don't know about you, I'm on my computer every day. And so if I just had that one symptom, it would be very problematic for me.
Yeah.
We're working with my hands and treating folks. So,
yeah.
It's very unique. How important, I always try to ask people, is how does this symptom impair your life, or how important is it to you? Because something that I am just listening to may not be as evident how it's impacting their life. And so each person has their own unique experience of how bothersome that symptom is.
Ah, interesting. Yeah. So just not asking necessarily for a laundry list, but what are some of the things that you've read about in your research and in your practice that women have either had the most issues with, or that seems to come up more commonly than other things? I mean, other than stopping your period, or having really heavy before it stops, or I mean, there's so many different varieties, right?
Right. I think in my experience, the some of the issues have been definitely the energy levels dropping, noticing the memory changes, or at least the cognitive and the mood changes. Gaining weight has been an issue as well for some folks, and definitely the aches and the pains, which again is a little harder to parse out. Is it menopausal symptoms? And we can talk about how estrogen really impacts cartilage and joints and yeah. So those are the things. Hot flashes for sure. In my practice, I haven't seen people with extremely severe hot flashes that have been super bothersome to them, but I know some of my colleagues have. So again, it's very unique. And I work with a lot of people that are starting to have thyroid issues. And so that also is a confusing picture. And I do work a lot with adrenal issues or burnout. So if you start out the process with those conditions, I often work with the adrenal system, the thyroid system, to address some of these menopausal concerns. But again, like thyroid condition can have weight gain. So, and then of course, sleep issues are that's a huge problem for folks. And impacts, of course, they impact your mood during the day if you don't have a great night's sleep at night.
Yeah, not to mention your partner if you happen to be sharing a bed.
Yes.
I know that, my husband had some issues with that when I'd have hot flashes during the middle of the night, which was quite often, and
yeah,
that would affect him.
Yes. Yeah.
Which was fine during the winter time, but not during the summer.
Right. Definitely don't want a hot flash during a heat wave.
Exactly. And we do have them, like right now.
Right.
Where you are, it's just warmer, not hot, but
it's a little humid. It's starting to make more of an impact than I realized. But yes.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, no, it was very hot here yesterday, and it's still hot today, but not quite as bad yet. It's like 104 or something, I think, yesterday.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty intense for this area. In thinking, that also brings up to mind the skin issues. People are noticing, speaking of the skin, you also, obviously with the hot flash, you sweat more, but people have noticed changes in their skin, their elasticity, and that develops more over time, but also vaginal dryness.
Yes.
Yeah. And people
that
also
go away.
Yeah, it's that's definitely a challenge, and then it leads to pain and discomfort and sometimes UTIs. So things of that nature.
Yeah. No, and I hadn't even remembered about that. I used to get UTIs quite often, which stopped, after a few years after, getting to the other side of menopause.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, the estrogen, the changing hormone levels, particularly estrogen, changes your pH in the vaginal space. So then the acidic space that normally wards off more, like keeps your flora in check in that area, becomes imbalanced, and then more prone and less protective. The acidity protects against infection, or it allows certain flora to grow or infections to take hold where they wouldn't have before.
Oh,
so
interesting. I wish I'd known that when I was going through menopause.
I know it's a process of learning and experiencing. 2020 hindsight.
Yeah, no, exactly. I had no idea that. I mean, I knew it had something to do with it, but I didn't know what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, that flora, we are very flora on our bodies is very sensitive to pH changes and pH levels. So
okay, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Does the heat, if you're living in a warm climate or a humid climate or something like that, does that affect it with the pH as well? Or
that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that question. I know that in terms of one symptom people have complained about is the greater body odor. And I think that when you sweat and that sits on your body and it interacts with the bacteria on your body, then it creates more of an odor, even though it might not be a particular infection. But yeah, but that is a great question of whether different climates impact. your skin pH.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Great
Huh.
topic for further research.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, especially skin. I mean, there's so many skin issues,
Mm-hmm.
particularly as you get older.
Yeah. Estrogen surprisingly does maintain that elasticity of our blood vessels.
Mm.
And it, once that is taken away, we can see it more starkly in folks that have had immediately to, like they've been on aromatase inhibitors, uh, cancer drugs that immediately stop estrogen
Mm-hmm.
function in your body.
Uh-huh.
We've seen that elasticity changes. Estrogen also helps maintain the thickness of your skin, the fat content in your skin, and there are estrogen receptors throughout our whole body. So even the
Huh.
immune cells have, estrogen receptors. And so it's, yeah, there's a whole host of effects that we, as the more and more we research, the more we find, oh, it impacts that too. But definitely the skin is the one we see the most. And lastly, there's a hyaluronic acid, which is
Uh-huh. Yeah.
a little tricky to say, but that maintains the moisture of your skin, and that also decreases, as well as postmenopausally, throughout that process of menopause and postmenopause, we lose about 30% of our collagen in our skin.
Ah,
The main
I can
kind
attest
of,
to that.
yeah. So that elasticity also becomes a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. No, exactly. Exactly. And as well, how well we heal from
Mm-hmm.
things, right? Because all of those things, the collagen and the hyaluronic acid and so many other things affect how even just getting cuts or whatever on your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just it just takes longer,
Yes.
and sometimes it never heals as well as it was
Right.
before, depending on what the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
you know so and the other thing too, that just occurs to me as well is, not to mention our bones, which I have my own experience with, but because there is that connection with osteoporosis,
Yes, absolutely.
right? And we might also want to talk about this. I like to call it a misconception, but whatever. Um, from decades ago, that women should start taking calcium
Mm-hmm.
and loading up on calcium. But they were never told to load up on the other minerals at the same time, so that it could
Right.
all be balanced and be taken in and used
Yes.
by your bodies. And too much calcium is not good for you either, just by itself.
No. No, absolutely. Putting calcium, there was a great description that helps me remember. It's basically, it's like putting concrete on a scaffolding, and it's, concrete's hard,
Yeah.
and it definitely, you need to have more things within that structure to maintain kind of give and elasticity. If you just put concrete on a lattice, then the bones become brittle. They're
Yeah.
not as functional. You just end up with very hard, brittle bones. You
Yeah.
definitely need magnesium and vitamin D and
Right.
boron, like you said, a whole host of minerals that synergistically work together with the calcium, and of
Yeah.
course help with the absorption of it as well. Calcium needs to be acidified to be absorbed, so the form of calcium matters as well.
Ah, interesting. Interesting. Okay. And the other issue, one of the side effects as well, is that your body will put calcium in other places where it ought not to be, like in
Yes.
your blood vessels.
Absolutely, yeah. Overloading on calcium can contribute to plaque formation in the cardiovascular system, which we obviously do not want, and causes a whole host of other
Yeah.
risks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But that brings up, that's one of estrogen's main, one of the positive effects of having estrogen in our bodies is maintaining that bone structure. It really helps maintain healthy bones.
Mm-hmm.
And so, having said that, there are many things you can do to I wouldn't say replace, but to help with that process, support that process.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those things is that definitely weight bearing exercises. We need weight on our bones to keep that structure kind of strong and flexible. And then as well as taking phytoestrogens or eating phytoestrogens, which are in a lot of legumes, basically. And phytoestrogens are plant estrogens, I guess, mimickers of estrogen that lightly bind to our system, but they have a great effect on our bones and our cardiovascular system and our nervous system. So even though they're not as strong as estrogens, our natural estrogens, they do have that kind of supportive effect and help maintain our bones after menopause.
And legumes are, for people who don't
beans, lentils, green beans.
Green beans I like.
Soy, if you're a soy person.
No, I like soy.
Soy, tempeh, which is fermented soy. You can. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm very demonstrative about things I like or don't like.
So traditional cultures that ingest an average day of soy has flavonoids and isoflavones and basically a traditional culture normal consumption of half a cup to a cup a day of soybeans or soy or tempeh. Basically they have experienced fewer menopausal symptoms
I love tofu. For some reason tempeh just doesn't. And beans, just straight beans, and it's interesting, and we'll digress here for a minute and a half maybe. It's so interesting, and I'm not the only one, obviously, that has this, but we all have particular tastes that appeal to us. And a lot of times it's because you need that. Right? You'll get a taste for something that you've never eaten before.
Right.
But beans, just beans by themselves, right? Like lima beans, or baked beans, or any of that kind of stuff. I cannot stand the texture. I do not eat those. You put them together in a bean spread, I'm fine.
There you go.
Yeah, I love, like I said, I love tofu, but just having soybeans, if they're raw, that'd be okay. Those taste okay, but not cooked. And it is funny because everybody's got their right, their likes and dislikes and the things that they're like, oh no, I can't eat that.
And it's I think in my experience, a long-term plan that people can stick with are things that they like and they enjoy and they look forward to. And sometimes that takes some investigating. But definitely foods that I never thought I would like until I started to maybe cook them myself or experiment with different ways of preparing. But, it's some things are an acquired taste and you have to be excited to try to acquire it. And some things are just no-goes. In the Romanian culture, we have an incredible white bean spread. It's basically like a pureed white bean puree with fresh garlics. It's very pungent, and then some caramelized onions on top. And you eat it as a spread with bread, and it's incredible. So
I could do that.
Yeah, exactly. I am not so much of the plain white bean kind of eater, but when you put that in front of me, it's really hard to resist.
Yeah, exactly. So what about something like peanuts? Because they always remind me of beans. But I mean, I love them. I love peanuts. Don't get me wrong. But
peanuts are a legume. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
The thing with nuts in general, they're typically a moderate amount or a good amount may have a good place in a healthy diet. The challenge with them is that the raw form of the nuts have the healthy monounsaturated fats and oils in them. Basically, once you roast the nuts, which we all love the flavor of, it damages those oils. And so then your body and your liver particularly has to detoxify those oils. And so you've lost some of that health benefit. So they do bring some fiber with them, but eating them raw is basically the best way, or, slicing them, putting them on a salad. But that is the ideal way to eat them. Rather than roasted. I can't think of having raw. I've had raw almonds, raw pecans, but I can't think of having raw peanuts if that's they're not, it's not bad. It's not bad. The roasted obviously taste better. But sometimes it's almost it's also because of the salt, which is also not very good for you. Yes.
But they usually come salted, the roasted salted.
Oh, so delicious. Yeah. I definitely have to enjoy some once in a while.
Just to make sure, right?
Yes, exactly. Nowadays, people are really doing a great job of sprouting and making nut butters sprouted of raw, and that also brings out some of the enzymes and the nutrients, makes them more available, and also I think, for me personally, enhances the flavor of a raw nut butter. But so now we have more options, I think, at the grocery store of ways we can ingest these.
I'll have to look for that. I don't think I've ever had that sprouted nut butters. Okay.
Yeah.
One more thing to look for.
Yes.
Like I don't have enough that I buy at the supermarket. But that's okay. That's okay. Variety is always good. Always
yes.
Good.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How about things like dairy? And I personally I like yogurt. I eat goat yogurt mostly because I can't do cow stuff.
Got it.
But a lot of people do eat cow dairy and like that. How is it for doing dairy products as you're going through menopause, or even otherwise, for women?
In moderation, I would say it, again, focusing on organic dairy, or I was going to say organic soy as well, making sure that it doesn't come with extra hormones or pesticides in it.
Particularly the latter,
fermented foods in general are healthy as we age, especially to maintain that flora in our digestive tract, but then it also impacts your vaginal flora, surprisingly, dietary yogurt and fermented food. So if you can do dairy, I would say, unless you're loading on it 3 times a day, it's a good quality yogurt or a small amount of even full fat cheese that you're enjoying. It should not be a problem. Just it does contribute to mucus production, which in small amounts is protective to our bodies. But one of the things that people start to complain about is snoring during this period, and maybe the start of some new kinds of snoring symptoms that they didn't have before. And definitely eating a lot of dairy with creating that extra mucus can contribute to that symptom. So if you're having issues with that, that's something you might want to look at.
I've never heard that before. That's very interesting. Yeah. That's I have to remember that. I like eating cheese, and I like having my yogurt. I mean, I only eat a couple of teaspoons of yogurt with my cereal, but the goat cheese as well.
Yes. In Romanian culture, when you eat a soup, you often put a scoop of sour cream on top, kind of as a condiment. So I think one of the suggestions of using these things as condiments or really at least helpful for me. It's not don't enjoy, but it's enjoy in moderation. And the condiment helps remind me like, okay, a whole pint of it is not where I'm going with this. It's more a few spoonfuls or,
Yeah.
a thumb's worth of,
Yeah. Oh,
of
exactly.
cheese.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I make a couple slices of
Hmm.
cheese with some crackers.
Yeah, that's a lovely snack. I also love I apples and a little bit of cheese.
Ah, yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, and that brings up a good subject too, which is that um, my husband and I have gotten into, instead of having regular desserts, we
Hmm.
have fruit, which of course
Hmm.
in Europe is very common,
Yes.
but has never been totally common here in the States. And we found that's just great. We don't even have to eat a whole piece of fruit. It'll take us 2 or 3 days to go through an apple
Hmm.
or an orange, but just that little bit of sweetness
Yes.
takes care of that yearning for the dessert. Excuse me.
Yes. And in Ayurvedic medicine, they consider that, and I'm sure other cultures beyond that, a little bit of sweet to help with the overall digestion of the meal. And
Ah,
so there's always a small something in the meal that adds that. But going back to the skin changes, is that things like the bioflavonoids
mm,
and the vitamin C content helps maintain that collagen and that skin
mm,
integrity and even the blood vessel integrity.
mm.
And half a cup of berries at the end of a meal as a dessert is a really nice and easy way, especially during the summer when they're in
Uh-huh.
season,
Yeah.
to help with that.
Yeah. Oh no, that sounds good. Absolutely. Yeah, we love our blueberries.
Yes.
Um,
Me too.
so we're kind of starting to run out of time here. The only other thing I wanted to kind of touch on, and you and I kind of talked about this beforehand, is is what what's kind of the carry on, right? I mean, it's not like, oh, you go through menopause and then you die or something. I mean, that's not right. Then you kind of move on to whatever the next stage is, and some of the things continue, some
Mm-hmm.
change,
Yes.
and you may get some new ones, right?
Yes. Yeah. So definitely the overall, like we're talking about the skin issues, the dryness of the bodies, the
Like
mood.
crepey.
Yeah. The mood, hopefully the mood symptoms will go away, the insomnia will resolve, but sometimes it does continue on. One of the things that we definitely want to postmenopausal look to support is the cardiovascular system and the osteoporosis. So those are the two major ones where those any kind of concerns or risk factors that start in menopause, we want to continue to support a healthy diet and lifestyle and uh, healthcare regimen for. And the other thing is diabetes risk, and
Oh,
making sure your blood sugar also contributes. Your well managed blood sugar will continue to support longevity.
uh-huh.
So, those are the three areas I would say that we're concerned on, uh,
Uh-huh.
forming a good healthy
Mm.
healthcare plan going forward for those three top concerns, as well as cognitive. Of course, everybody wants to stay sharp as they age. And so hopefully after that menopausal period, the memory will come back. But there are definitely things, diet, lifestyle, and herbal things that you can do to support that going
Mm.
forward.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which just brought up something in my brain, and now I can't remember what it was. Apropos to that, the oh, I know. How much is something like? I mean, I know heart and cardiovascular things can be hereditary,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are certain things that'll be in families or whatever, and sometimes not. Um, but what about some of the other things like osteoporosis or some of these other ones that are, can those also be hereditary, or maybe you're predisposed to it a little bit because of something that you've gotten, from your mother or your father or whatever?
Definitely, there is an association, or there are risk factors that you inherit from your family with osteoporosis.
Okay.
And there are also, your history of hormone use, or, if you've gone into early menopause, or you for some reason have had your estrogen is decreased much earlier in life, you've had less of an opportunity for the estrogen to reinforce that bone structure over time. So there are some personal factors, but definitely hereditary is something to look at in your personal family history. Does predispose you to more osteoporosis risk.
Okay. Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. So just as an aside, because we are getting late here, something that I know there's been a lot of change over the last 30, 40 years as far as with hysterectomies with women for various reasons. And I know that to a certain degree, they try and take out as little as possible these days, instead of just saying, oh, great, we'll just take it all. So is that something that is a little more widespread with doctors being a little more cognizant of that connection between maybe trying to leave, I don't know, some pieces in there if they're not really affected?
Yeah, I definitely see more and more there are gynecologists that are more aware of that, and so when they are considering these procedures, they are trying to. I can't really speak to the wider culture, but the folks I've interacted with are much more cognizant of how important all of these structures are. And interestingly, even removing their uterus without and just leaving the ovaries, hormone levels drop, or the symptoms in menopause are greater regardless. So I think as more and more research comes out, it will just permeate throughout the medical community, and the procedures will hopefully get less invasive. But I can't speak to the wider broad how far that's been, but in my personal experience, the gynecologists I've worked with have definitely become less invasive over time, and more there's just more wanting to preserve the structures as much as possible.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm just aware of that because my mother had a full hysterectomy when I was born.
And very common. Yeah,
because she had very heavy periods and lots of issues. And she developed a horrid case of osteoporosis for many, many years, and really just went, her top part just went down and cracks and horrible things.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And so I'm just very aware of it, but also realizing that that it's not genetic for me, because they did it for a whole different reason, right?
Yes. And that brings up a thought that actually I do work with women that have PCOS and endometriosis. And in that case, there's a lot of uterine fibroids, and there are a lot of strategies around trying to preserve, in that way, I would say gynecologists are trying everything else that I've worked with, everything else to preserve those structures without having to remove them, even though they're causing problems. So that is becoming like a last resort thing. So hopefully that will continue on a broader scale.
Don't fibroids in a lot of people, a lot of women get less, they kind of shrink and stuff when they do hit menopause? Because that's what I had.
In some women, yes.
Yeah,
and some definitely. They're if they are responding to that estrogen, which they typically are, that estrogen stimulation, and the estrogen drops, they will become smaller because they don't have that stimulation to grow anymore. Yeah. So some women find relief.
Yeah. No, that was a good thing.
Yes.
So anyways, is there anything else you want to just say or to wrap up or?
Yeah, I
Okay.
will say, just to wrap up,
Uh-huh.
thinking of menopause as a natural process and one that you can, I'll say that Christiane Northrup has a great way of saying it's an opportunity to prioritize your life, and the hot flashes help you burn off everything that's not important in your life. So kind of seeing it as a transition point and a reorienting of your life, maybe, or of priorities rather than a disease process. And that there's a lot to do to support that process. And, the healthier you can be, being a good weight, maintaining your exercise, and in terms of weight, having people who are a healthy weight have an easier time going through that transition. But seeing it as an overall transition that needs to be kept in balance, I think reframes it and helps us go through it much easier and seek solutions rather than just assume there's nothing to be done or that it will, we will come out the other side and have an opportunity to be healthy.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say life is kind of like that. If you wait long enough, typically it'll go away and you get on to some other period of
yes,
that you can worry about.
Yes. But having also, if the symptoms are really bothersome, or it's always good to get checked out. I know that I'm biased as a doctor, but working with someone and making sure that the symptoms that come up are not symptoms of other conditions is also important, to make sure that you stay healthy and are not missing a thyroid case or a thyroid condition or other issues, and working on your stress levels and your lifestyle can really make a huge difference. But it's a whole multifactorial kind of process. It's not, and very unique to each person. But I think there's plenty of opportunity to reorient ourselves into a much healthier state by the end of it.
I would totally agree. And the only thing I would add to that is that it probably, what you just said is probably good advice no matter what age you are.
Yes.
Because it really applies whether you're 19 years old, or, although I'm sure there's no 19-year-olds listening, but you never know. But, any age, until you're not here anymore. I mean, life is a continual process of changing.
Yes.
And embracing that, I think, is so important.
Yes.
To living a good life.
Yes, and actually, that makes me think of a Harvard study where they looked at people's attitude towards aging, and they found that the more your attitude and expectations around it, the more positive they were, the greater the longevity. So definitely, just, obviously, it's not always easy to be positive in every stage of change, but our expectations can impact how we experience something.
That goes for everything. That goes for absolutely everything. For a new job, for an old job, for a new romance. I mean, for absolutely everything in your life.
Yeah.
For sure. So, on that positive note, we will wrap this up, and I will say that this is not to be seen as medical advice, even though Cris is a naturopathic doctor. But if you're having any kind of issues, please remember to go to your doctor or find a new doctor and get yourself looked at. And other than that, I will be back next week, and Cris will be back in another couple of weeks. And at that point, we are going to talk about the male version of menopause, better known as andropause. Andropause. So, which I think people probably don't know as much about as we all know about the menopause.
Yes.
So that's going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to that one in particular.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I look forward to it as well.
Love having you here. Thank you.